Hi everyone, it's Stephanie and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be creating this card that was designed by design team member Keeway using new products from the September 2017 release. So the stamp set we're going to be using is the Rustic Wildflowers, and this is a really great layering stamp set, and it also works really well for watercoloring techniques. So that's what we're going to do with these distress inks here. We are going to add the ink to the stamps with the distress ink, and then we're going to spritz it with water before we actually stamp it onto our cardstock. So I have a piece of watercolor cardstock and it's cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I've just placed it in my mini MISTI to do all of my stamping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with one flower and then just kind of work my way around the whole center area of this panel and create a big bouquet of both flowers and leaves. I picked out some distress inks that go nicely together, including Wild Honey, Picked Raspberry, Seedless Preserves, Worn Lipstick, Forest Moss, and Mowed Lawn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first ink up the stamp and then I'm going to spritz it with water before I actually stamp it down on the paper. And you're going to see here, this first one, I spritzed way too much. I have way too much water on here and I lost a lot of the definition of the flower. Now that's not all bad. If you want to have it more full like this, where you have the background area of the flower kind of really full with color, then you definitely want to spritz it as much as I did here with that water. But I want to have the petals a little bit more defined, so as I go, I start to apply less water with each flower and leaf image, and I slowly kind of get to a point where I kind of know how much water I want to add there. So this next flower, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a little bit more water than I want on here. So when I spray it and then stamp it down, I get a really nice full background. So you can definitely see, though, I have more definition with this one, but it does have bigger petals, so it allows me to have a little bit more of that flower shape than that first pink one. So I'm just going to work my way around this panel and just kind of pick out the different flowers that I feel will fill up the space. And then if I get too much water when I do the stamping, I just take a paper towel and kind of dab it over top, and it just soaks up that excess water but leaves all of that stamp detail underneath. So what I start to do as I keep going here is I start to realize that I like having the color kind of around the outside edge of the stamp, and I don't put as much color on the inside of the stamp. So you can kind of see as I add the stamp pad to the top of the stamp, I concentrate more on the outside edges than I do in the center. And that gives me a really fun look because I get the definition of those leaves because I have the darker shading on the outside and it kind of fades in on the inside. And then I also get that really nice petal definition. For the leaves, I don't really have any design in place. I just kind of go with it and do the flower images first. And then any areas that kind of have an open space, I just throw some leaves in there. And it looks a little bit funny just because I have a leaf kind of floating in between those flowers. But by the time we get all of the flower images stamped and then we do some die cutting through this, because we are going to add our sentiment right through this stamping area, you're not going to notice that as much and everything is going to blend together really nicely. I decided after I did some pink and purple and the kind of yellowish color that I needed a little bit of the red in there, so I did stamp some Worn Lipstick flowers, and I really love how muted that kind of looks with the pink color. I just think it definitely added to the overall look and kind of gave this a really nice cohesive feel. Once I'm done with all of the stamping, I am going to be die cutting my sentiment right through the center area of these flowers. So I really want to make sure that I have enough area stamped so that when I do the die cutting of the word, that it's going to cut through a bunch of the flowers. That really just adds to the whole overall look. And I don't really want a lot of white space where I'm doing the die cutting. So I'm just adding some more stamping at the bottom area and just filling in some of those holes. And then once I have this last little red guy here, that is going to finish the base of the stamping, and I'm going to remove this from my MISTI so that I can do some of the layering stamps. When I do all the stamp layering here, I'm not going to add any water like I did with the base of the flowers. For these ones, I'm just going to stamp them directly onto the flower designs. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of picking out different distress ink colors that are a little bit darker in the same color or a completely different color. It just kind of depended on what color I was stamping over top of. And then I'm just going to take all of those layering stamps and go right over top to give these even more definition. So you can see I have some really nice orange detail on the yellow flowers. I used the darker purple on the pink flowers. For those really dark purple flowers, I actually use green. It just kind of looks like a darker shade of purple once you layer it, and it really helps to help that layer stand out. So I just kind of went around and completely filled in all of the flowers first, and then I followed up with the leaves and did the layering stamps on those as well. So now that I have all the stamping done and the panel is dry, I took the second largest rectangle from the A2 rectangle stack set 2 and die cut that panel. And now I'm going to die cut it once again with the word blessed right through the center. And you can see there I have my word die cut, I have the negative space in the flowers, and then I also have all of the center pieces from that word because we're going to want to put them back into the word once we put everything together here on the card. So you just want to make sure that you don't lose any of those inside pieces. So now I've also cut a second cardstock panel out of some raspberry cardstock, and for this one I used the largest rectangle from that die set, and I'm just layering my stamp piece directly over top of this. And you can see before I laid that on there, I also added adhesive to the center area of that pink panel, and what that's going to do is allow me to put in these word dies as well as the inside pieces so that everything kind of adheres down. So I first put in the word blessed that I cut from black cardstock, and now I'm taking all those inside pieces and adding them into all of the openings. And like I mentioned earlier, because I already have that adhesive laid down, those are going to stick in there no problem, and I don't have to add any liquid glue or anything to completely adhere those down. We are going to add some dimension to the sentiment by taking 3 more of these die cut words that we've cut from the black licorice cardstock, and I'm just going to use some liquid glue, and I'm going to add glue to each of these words and then just layer them one on top of another. So I like to just take my liquid glue and kind of dot it all over the back until I have it nice and covered with glue, and then I just position it right over top and then line it up so that everything is all together. And using the liquid glue really helps to do this because it lets you kind of move the piece around until you have it exactly where you want it positioned. So once I get the last layer of the black licorice cardstock die cut words here, I'm going to go ahead and add the very top part, which is going to be the stamp piece that we originally die cut from the panel. So I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm adding the liquid glue all the way to the back of this. But when I position this one on my word, rather than go completely over top, I'm going to kind of offset it down towards the bottom and to the right a bit. Not a lot, just enough so that we can see some of that black cardstock peeking through. And it kind of gives the die cut word a shadow effect and really helps it to stand out from the stamped background. So even though we have all of the stamping that's completely perfect through the word in the background, that word still stands out because we have that black cardstock layered underneath, and we kind of have a shadow effect by kind of shifting that stamped die cut word at the top. So now to finish off the card, I'm just going to take the panel and add it to a white card base that measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And then once I have that fully adhered, we are finished with this card, and we have created this beautiful watercolor flower pattern in the background with this die cut words cut right through that pattern. Thank you so much to Keeway for creating this beautiful card that we were able to recreate in today's class, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.